Yeah.
I wanted to go through a few common objections and like how that you address them. I need some time to think about it.
I need to think about it. It's not a real objection. If somebody says, I need to think about it, there's something that you did really wrong in the conversation. Any objection that you get, you caused it. Those are the two reasons why somebody wants to change: pain or fear of future pain. And so if I include both in a sales conversation, they have internal tension in their body and they are like, I have to do something about it. And when they have all this internal tension in their body, they have to release it. And the only way for them to release it is for them to make a change.
Welcome to the Millionaire Mentorship Podcast. Today, we have Kayla Hodges, who is a badass saleswoman. And when she rolled across my feed, the type of game she was spitting on sales, I had not seen probably since Alex Hormozi, who I think really articulates sales well. And I've actually sent her information to several people in sales, and they have all said the same thing. So I'm super pumped to have Kayla on the podcast today. So welcome.
What an introduction. You're nice like that to everybody, huh, Troy? So what's happening here? Just say great things.
Usually in the start.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm just interested in like how you got your start. You seem very vibrant and young. And so I know I'm not supposed to ask, but can you tell us how young you are?
I'm 30. I'm 30 years old. 30 years young. I also have an 11-year-old, so I think that definitely has something to do with that for sure.
Yeah, that's great. So how did you get started? Tell us about your story. How did you get into sales?
I started in B2B. I got a really great opportunity. Before that, I was a waitress for almost 10 years, maybe like 8.5, 9. And when I got this opportunity, the person that offered me the job was really big into personal development, knew Tony Robbins personally. And I was big into personal development at the time. I was really learning, really craving to be successful. And I just felt like I was working really hard, but couldn't do it. I was back in school full time. I had a full-time job. I was a personal trainer as well. Like I never slept. And I was a single mom. So it was like, I was trying to do anything I possibly could to be able to take care of my girl and give her a different life. And when I met this person, I met him at an event and they said that they knew Tony Robbins personally. So I was like, how does this guy know Tony Robbins? And I was really obsessed. And I went to him at the end of this event. It was like 10 p.m. at night. I was like, I know that you know Tony Robbins. Like, how do you know Tony? He was like, who told you that? And I'm like, this person. And he said that Jim Rohn was his personal mentor. Jim Rohn mentored Tony Robbins as well, right? And a mentor, I never thought about that before. That word had never been, spoken about around me. I never thought of like what a mentor was. I'm like, how do I get one of those? Yeah. Like a bunch of, I was like, Tommy, sign me up, and it's like, are you serious? And I'm like, yeah. Like, how do I get one of those? And he was like, well, I'll tell you what, if you go home and you listen to the Challenge to Succeed by Jim Rohn 10 times, I will have a conversation with you. And so I went home and I looked it up online, and it was like a seminar. I think it was like 8 or 9 hours long, this seminar. And it was like $40 in audio. And so I used the last bit of a Discover credit card to pay for this thing. And I listened to the whole thing within like 24 hours. And I messaged him. I was like, 1 down, 9 to go. And he was like, are you serious? They said, yes. And so he met me at a coffee shop and was asking me like what I wanted in my life. And I'm just bawling, right? In this coffee shop. I remember it so vividly. It was in Houston. I'm upstairs. I'm just crying to this stranger about how I couldn't be successful and how it wasn't fair. And like all my life circumstances like made it to where it wouldn't be fair, and how like I was basically such a victim because of like my parents never asked me about my grades. And I got pregnant as a teenager, and then I got married, and my husband was an abusive alcoholic, and like just horrible stuff had just happened to me over and over and over. I just felt so unworthy, so unloved, like so like against the world was against me. And he was like, you're on a hamster wheel and you're not going anywhere. I was like, that's exactly how I feel.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I want you to come work for me. And it was a B2B job. But if I would come work for him, it was a Friday. If I was to come work for him, I would have to quit everything. So on Monday, I quit school, which I had a 4.0 again in biochemistry, molecular biology pre-med. I quit school, which my family thought was crazy, right? I quit my job, which, pulled in like at least six figures in fine dining. Right? I was doing really well, like right under six figures. And then I also quit my personal training job, which was bringing me extra, which is how I was paying for the nanny to take care of my daughter while I was doing all this stuff. And I started in sales, and I was really horrible. I sucked really, really bad. And I was really determined to figure it out. So I just like started studying and learning, and I like refused to go backwards because like this is my first opportunity for a real person job, that I'm not a waitress anymore. I can actually do something with my life. And so I was just so determined to figure it out.
Caleb, what gave you, I appreciate you sharing all of that. And it sounds like where you were at in your life was at like the point where this guy spoke something to you where you were willing to burn the bridges or burn the ships and leave everything back. So what gave you such belief in either him or yourself that this was the right opportunity to quit? I mean, if you're getting a 4.0,
yeah.
I worked at Red Robin for 8 years. It wasn't fine dining, but I understand the business, and I know you can get stuck in there because it's great money for that whole thing, and you're getting it every night, and you got the side hustle. But what gave you the confidence or the belief in yourself or the belief in this person to quit, to burn all the ships? Okay,
I really love that you picked up on that because I've done that multiple times in my life. Very interestingly enough, it was me. Like I've always felt like I was meant for more. I was supposed to do something really impactful in this world. Like I've always felt like that ever since I was a little kid. And it would always stress me out. Like I remember going to my mom at like 12 years old, bawling my eyes out, saying like, Mom, I don't want to do it. And she was like, what are you talking about? But I knew what I was going to build in my life. And I knew all the responsibility and all the hardships that I would have to go through. This is crazy. I was crying to her, at 12 years old. She didn't understand. Right. I felt like it was a very like spiritual moment for me because I remember it very, really well. But it was like me. I was like, this is not my life. That's how I felt. I was like, this is not my life. And if like I don't do something crazy, like I'm going to stay here forever. I'm like, this is not it. And so I'm like willing to do anything because it just didn't match up with who I'm supposed to be. I don't know. Yeah. Makes sense. Like
yeah, no, it does make sense to me 100%. Like I had the same thing happen to me when I was 28, living in Washington and actually super successful at sales, working at a radio station. And I just felt like if I don't leave now, if I don't leave Seattle now, I'm going to be that guy who's always at the same bar, with the same friends. And I moved to Vegas and I did the same thing you did. I just left everything behind me. And so I understand it, but not a lot of people are going to do that type of a thing or are going to believe in themselves enough to do that. So tell us about the job. What are you doing B2B? What are you selling?
Yeah, so smart home automation. And so I would like have to walk onto random job sites of these huge estates. So like an estate is like 10,000 square feet and up in Houston. So huge estates are being built, right? And my job was to create relationships with builders. And we would go through and we would wire these estates with like the ability to be smart home compatible. And then as soon as I made that relationship with the builder and we wired the home, then I would convince the builder to transfer this over to our other department where they did B2C sales. And then we would sell the system on the back end, and then I would get a percentage of that sale as well.
Nice. Yeah, I put multiple home automation systems in my houses.
It's like Cardone, Savant, like that kind of stuff. Yeah, or like.
Yeah, like right now we have kind of like a low bid because I didn't want everything smart home. We just have the Sonos, but I'm building a house in Naples right now.
Okay.
And I decided after doing this one that I do want more smart home, and I forget which technology that he is using. Yeah. I know it's the one that's been around the longest period of time. I can't speak intelligently like you in that industry space about it, but I can tell you that I dropped 35, 40 grand on my first house. And so and I'm not a celebrity, so you're dealing with these high ass homes, you're probably selling $50,000, $100,000 systems.
Yeah. My first sale was $175,000. my first sale, right? And that was when I got like a $5,000 commission check in addition to my really good base, and I was like, I can do it. I was like, this is going to be something for me. So yeah, no, people spend a lot of money on these homes. And if you can get the courage to walk on these job sites, and you can speak intelligently, it works out well. But like there was so many times, Troy, where people just made me feel so incompetent. I felt so awkward. I would sweat a lot. I would stutter awkwardly. And these conversations, these guys would purposely tell me the wrong information just to see if I knew what I was talking about. So they would name the wires the wrong name on purpose to see if I knew what I was talking about or if I was just trying to smile and like close a deal. Everyone loved taking me to lunch. No one would like to buy from me. They loved going to lunch with me though. That was really hard. I just felt like no one took me seriously, or I'd book a meeting. I remember this one builder took me 6 or 7 months to get this builder huge. I land this meeting and I get in there with like one of my like CEOs and one of our other like head guys. The whole time they don't even look at me. I'm like, I'm the one that I took 7 months. Like I got this meeting. They don't even glance at me once, and just like making me feel so small. And so I was just really obsessed with like, I have to be intelligent here. Like I have to learn. I would wake up every morning, 4 o'clock in the morning before my daughter would wake up for school, and I would study for hours. I would get her to school. I would go to work. I would come home pick her up from school, keep working, put her to bed at night. And then I would study until like almost midnight,
Let's drill down on what you were studying, because I'm a sales guy. Like I've been studying, Tom Hopkins, Jim Rohn, all the great sales guys. And I'm just curious, you're fully immersed, probably reading every sales book. There's some good ones. There's some bad ones, as you know. Yeah. So, and the biggest thing is because you're feeling like you're not being taken seriously, right?
Correct. I feel like no one cares about what I have to say, and I don't know what I'm doing. That's why I would blank. Like someone who asked me questions, I'm like, shit, what do I say next? I have no idea. And so I would study. I did a lot of like all the old sales gurus, like all in the 80s, 70s, like all those books. I also, have bought a few courses from some people that I wouldn't recommend, but I don't want to say their name badly. So all the old school tactical training that I was obsessed with. And I would have like these little flashcards of like, if they say this, I say this. And people would say something, I would respond, and then half the people would look at me like I was crazy. The other half would get upset. A couple times it would work. I'm like I'm doing something wrong. But it was starting to work. Some things were working because I was starting to understand the psychology of like how to get somebody like through a process, right? Because first I just didn't understand like, oh, you take people through a process. Like I didn't get that. I was like, oh, like here's my stuff. Bye. Here, I'm gonna smile. Like that really wasn't working. So if I started asking some questions and started understanding what's going on and like seeing if we can help, like I started getting them through that. And then I started closing deals, especially because I had some other help, with people on my team as well. I bought my first sports car, thought it was super cool. And then COVID hit and I lost everything all over again.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. No, that was interesting. I lost my job. And I was another moment where I'm like standing in my apartment. I'm like, this is not my life, right? I was like, I made so much money. I didn't know what to do with money. So I spent so much money. I'm sitting in my apartment. I'm like, I don't have anything left, and I'm behind my rent. It's due in 3 days. I'm behind by $756 and I don't have it. And no one can help me. I don't have family that can help me. No one can help me. I'm alone again. And I'm just like, what am I supposed to do? And so at the same time, I was studying like behavioral psychology, NLP, strategic intervention. I was like, I really wanted to like be a coach and like help people do breakthroughs like Tony Robbins did. I did his program. I crewed on his team for like 3 years. I really wanted to learn how to do that. And I found this course that would teach you how to sell online, like B2C. And I never had done that before.
Was it a good one?
I only took the first month of it. It gave me the feedback that I needed to learn how to do, right? And it taught me what I was supposed to do. I got it, kind of moved forward, but it was 12 grand and I didn't have the money at all. The first payment was $3,000 And I was sitting in my apartment. I was like, again, this is not my life. I was like, F it. Like, I don't care. I sold my kids' furniture. I sold my furniture. We slept on the ground that night. I sold pots and pans. I sold shoes. I sold my purse. I sold perfume. I sold my mirror, my desk, my carpet. I sold everything in that apartment. I raised $4,200 in 36 hours. I paid my rent. I paid the program. Had $500 left. I packed up my car and I moved to Miami and just drove there.
And where were you living at that point in time?
In Houston. I grew up in Texas. I was like, this is not it. I was like, Texas is not it. I have to leave.
Right. So you go to Miami.
But I moved to Miami.
The place where you settle down. It's like there's nothing going on in Miami. It's super boring. Maybe you're definitely gonna get focused on sales. No, I'm messing with you. I love Miami. It's one of my favorite places.
It's my favorite place. And I moved there and I had nothing. My daughter and I are in an Airbnb room, not a place, a room. That's all I could afford. But she wasn't in school because it was COVID. So she's on her iPad. So it was perfect. And I would wake up every single day, again, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was going through that course that I was writing it down verbatim because I knew I could only afford 1 month. So I wrote down that entire course in 30 days, right? I just went through the whole entire program in 30 days and I wrote it all down, a notes for each thing. And then I gained my first client in that 30 days. My first client paid me 10 G's and I got my first apartment within 2 months. And every single day, all I did was network. So I get on Bumble Business. I would do Zoom calls every single day. From there,
there's a Bumble Business.
Yeah, Bumble Business. Yeah, and
tell me about that. Is that like dating for like?
That's networking.
So just to be clear, let me go backwards. So I'm 46, and so my internet dating days were when Match was the only game in town. Okay, so I don't know. I missed out on the old swipe in. I missed out on everything like that. So tell me where we're at today. Bumble Business.
Yeah, Bumble Business. So it's kind of like LinkedIn, but you're swiping on people. So just like a modern LinkedIn, I guess. So I was doing that. And I was like meeting a lot of people and met somebody that was like the Miami chapter chair for the Global Leaders Organization. And so I started working with them and I started putting on events and speaking at events for investors and CEOs. And I just met a lot of people, just kept meeting people. And I got my first B2C job after that point, where I was selling like social media marketing. I was doing 220 calls a day. So there I started making, like a decent amount, I started making like a little over 15K and a month. And like, that was really good for me because I was like, oh, finally consistency, like not worried about stuff anymore. It felt good. And then, sales just felt really bad for me. Like I hated it every single day. I hated it. I would look at the phone. I wanted to puke because I was calling all these people and they were yelling at me and cussing me out on the phone. And I was just like, this freaking sucks.
Yeah.
It was awful. Yeah. And from there, I was like, what if I just started doing my own thing in terms of the sales conversations? So like, I had this epiphany. This day, this guy calls me and he's like, F you, never call me again. I hate your company, and like hangs up on me. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? First of all, B2B sales, all these guys were way too nice to me and they wouldn't take me seriously and they kept on trying to date me. And now I'm here and the guys are yelling at me. Something's off, right? I'm like, they can't see me. He can't see me. I was like, if he knew I was like a young single mom, maybe he would be a little bit nicer.
Yeah.
Right? So I sent him a picture of me and my daughter. I was like, hey, I'm sorry for whatever I did to offend you. Like, I'm just working to take care of my girl, right?
Well, right? Started to like it, yeah.
And then he messaged me. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry. You're so beautiful, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, but you're great. Okay. But then the next day, I was like, I'm on to something.
What?
And so the next day, instead of doing the stupid, like, hey, my name is so-and-so, I'm with so-and-so company, and the reason why I'm calling you today is I'm going to help you find a problem in your business, and blah, blah, blah. What's the biggest problem you have right now? It is so gross. So the next day, I'm calling someone. I was like, how do I appear like a woman? I'm like, what if I, like, soften my voice? What if I, like, am a little bit more pleasant? What if I just do it a little bit differently? And so I was starting to play around with stuff, and I would be like, hey, like, would it be okay if I just hop on Zoom? Let me see if I can even help. I would hop on Zoom and I started like playing with like my assets that I had. I was like, okay, like what if I just come across with like, let me see if I can even help. And I was just started to play around and I started getting way better. And then I had a lot of girls that were my friends who were like, hey, look, can you please help me? Because I'm trying to do this. I don't know how to sell. So I had a girl that was in fitness, started helping her. A girl that was in product sales, started helping her, started helping them make money. I'm like, hey, I'm onto something here. I'm going to build a program for women. And this was like 3.5 years ago. And I called this program Sell Like a Badass. And it was me and it was 11 girls. It was a group program. And, we did great. Helped them make money. It was awesome. But I didn't know how to run a business at all. And I was super burned out. I couldn't take any more time to sell. I was like, or I did like VIP days with these girls and they would learn everything in a day, but then they wouldn't implement because there was no accountability. I was like, oh, there's something off here. And I was just really tired, really burnt out, went through like a really bad breakup and did a lot of like trauma intervention and some personal work on me. And I was like, you know what? I can't be giving anyone right now. I need to work on me. I'm going to go back into sales. So I went back into sales, started crushing it at that point. Like I was doing over 35K a month, which was like really, really good for me on my end, for where I came from. And
I think 5K a month for anybody who's listening right now is a very nice income.
yeah, right? Well, I want to say that because I know there's some people out there, they're like, oh, I've done millions and millions of sales and stuff, which I think is super awesome. You have to think about this, like a business sales, that's over $300,000 of sales in a month. You know what I mean? Which is super cool. So it's like a commission based. But I just like was really proud of me at that point and wanted to start my own business, had the business partners kind of like screw me over a couple of times and started learning how to navigate stuff and built a second company, had to take out a hard money loan to pay my team, which was crazy. And it started building and we got acquired for like 7 months. I had the option of coming and getting my company back, and I did. And we've had over 200 girls go through our program this past year. Girls that have come in that were making 25K that are now making over $100,000 a month. Girls that started at 0 that are now making 20, helped over maybe 25 girls get jobs this past year, and I've just seen people like go through a divorce and were able to like take care of themselves, or like a death happened in their family. They were able to take care of themselves. Someone was able to have their baby, go on maternity leave, take care of themselves. It's been like the coolest thing watching these girls and like feeling like I can be like a piece of their story because I taught them how to sell in a way that felt aligned and authentic to who they are. And, I learned that as a girl, as a woman, we're not built like a guy. And when I try to sell like a guy and I try to push all my emotions to the side and focus only on work, and because you guys can do that, y'all are so lucky. Y'all think about one thing at a time. If you have an argument, with your significant other in the morning, it really doesn't affect you for the rest of the day. Like for me, like my day's ruined. I can't do anything for the rest of the day. And so learning how to work internally on myself and give myself tools emotionally while I worked on my skill was the one thing that helped me like completely change everything. And helping these girls do the same thing at the same time is like the one thing that has helped them completely dramatically change their world. And so that's kind of the long-winded version of how we got to this place. But yeah, I'm just feeling super blessed and super grateful for these women.
Yeah, and I think it's very inspirational because I think a lot of times people, when they look at people who appear successful online or are successful online, they don't know the backstory. They assume that most people are like either scamming or they're fake or they're this or they're that. And that's why we do these podcasts, is because we want to get to know the person on the other side of the screen and find out like what it's all about. And I've had a chance to talk to Kayla and she knows her stuff. So let's go into tactically.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned before that you kind of developed your own sales process. So break down your sales process now, like how you would coach someone to sell.
Okay, so our methodology is called RED. So it's real, empowering, disarming questions. So I want it to feel authentic, not just for you as a salesperson, but also for the prospect. Because what I've noticed is that sometimes we have a lot of sales conversations and it feels awkward, or these people like are pretending to be nice just to get you to buy from them. And then you just don't trust them. And so I want it to feel not like that, but I also want the sales rep to feel like they're in integrity while they're talking to somebody. So that's really important. And then secondly, the empowered aspect of like you feeling like you're here to help this person. one thing that I see people not do is like go in for the close at the end, or they feel awkward talking about pain. Well, if you're not thinking about yourself and you really care about the person in front of you and you know that you can help them, it would be selfish not to offer that help, right? So it's like understanding that, and then always disarming these people. So the biggest reason why somebody has an objection is because you trigger that objection to happen. And typically that is from your tonality or from the cadence in your voice or from like not pausing or not really understanding how to read their body language or read their tone. And so you don't pick up on the little nuances that could be going on. And so like learning how to disarm this person at all times or picking up on subtle cues that this person could be saying that could be like a red flag to your sale. Like, let's say like you do a program teaching people like on real estate, right?
Yeah, we do a mentorship program where we teach people how to get into real estate, how to scale.
Perfect. So a red flag that could happen for you is like, let's say that you're talking to somebody and they're telling you that they've gone through other mentorship programs before and they didn't work. Right? Yeah. Well, I need to handle that belief way before the end of the sale. Otherwise, they're going to think that yours doesn't work either. So the only way that I can get them to overcome that objection beforehand is getting them to take responsibility for the fact that they didn't get success in the other programs. Right. And so I could ask something along the lines of like, oh, like, well, what other programs did you do? Well, I did this and this and this. So in those programs, I mean, did like anybody get success in those programs? Like, help me understand. Well, I mean, yeah, this person was successful, this person. Well, can you help me understand, I guess, like what held you back from like having the same success? Well, I really never showed up on the calls. Oh, well, so help me understand, because I just want to make sure that you actually get help here. You've been feeling like this for what, 2 years, and you've gone through 3 different programs. So why would you be wanting to do another one if you didn't show up there? Why is it different now? And then they're telling you, and more importantly themselves, why they're going to show up this time. I'm like, well, are you sure? Because it's been the same way for the past 2 years. Yes, I'm sure. Well, why? Because I have a new baby on the way. Okay, so you understand that that baby needs you, right? Yeah, I have to do it. I'm like, okay, so we change beliefs in the middle of a conversation. So my process, I take people through, it's really interesting because I love the brain. I love science. So yeah. Inside of a sales conversation, what you're doing is crazy. And people don't understand this. But when you're taking them through this process, you start to get them to like build rapport with you in the beginning. And not like fake rapport, not like, hey, like, do you have a dog? I have a dog. Oh my God, you've been there. I've been there too. Not that fake stuff, but just like getting them to really understand that you're a knowledgeable expert. Right? Which is why I'm getting them to think results-based thinking at the very beginning of the conversation versus anything else. So like, hey, Troy, so it looks like we're talking today about you possibly looking at some additional help and wanting to understand real estate so that you can, you know, invest in more properties before the end of the year. Is that right?
That's right.
Right. So they're automatically thinking about why I'm here, because I'm not selling the thing, I'm selling the results of what that thing does.
Right.
Because I need them to think like that at the very beginning. And then I take them through the process. We're like, hey, conversation is going to be pretty easy. It's really more for me to understand like what you've invested in right now, what type of real estate programs and training that you've been through, any type of homes that you own, compared to what you're wanting. And that's not just like, you know, the investments that you want or like the financial gains, but also to make sure that you have consistency and make sure that you have clarity and you're making intelligent decisions moving forward, just so I have a better understanding of what this gap looks like to see if we can help. And then towards the end of this conversation, if you feel like this might be what you're looking for, we'll talk about possible next steps at that point, if that's helpful. So I'm really just like, there is possibility for something. That's not at the end. You can choose yes, no, or whatever. Like no one believes that you don't care if they say no at the end. So it's just really just getting them like we are having an intelligent conversation about you getting results. It's not a BS like we're going to connect and hopefully this is what you want. Like no. We're here for a very specific reason. If this feels like it's an alignment, like we'll talk about what's next. And then once I've built that rapport and I've understood their intent, like is there a specific reason as to why you're looking at additional mentorship for real estate right now? Just so I have a better understanding. Right. And now we can understand where they're coming from. Well, this happened. I lost a lot of money on this property earlier this year. I don't want that to happen again. And now you can understand like what's going on. And you start like walking them through the next aspects. understanding their current situation, understanding where they've invested in, what type of properties they have right now. Like, do they have money set aside for this? Like, why this is so important right now? Understanding that. And then once I understand the logical aspects of what's going on, they start to trust me more.
Yeah.
And from there, we start talking about pain. So for what's, I guess, what would be the biggest problems that your prospects have in your industry?
Well, I think the biggest problems that people have are the biggest objections.
Problems. There are problems.
The one thing that most people have a problem with is they think they got to understand everything to get started.
Okay.
Right? That is a problem because most of them just have a hard time starting. And even when they do the coaching, even when they get the instruction, they just have a hard time starting. Is that what you're referring to? Or are you talking about something?
It's a layer underneath that. Okay. So they have a hard time starting. Because they have a hard time starting, what's the consequence of that?
They don't do it.
And when they don't do it, what happens?
They're not successful.
Yeah, they're not making money.
Yeah.
Right? Their money's not working for them. So now they're paying taxes on that money. So they're losing money, or that money's just sitting there. Right? And so I can't tell them that.
Right.
I can't be like, hey, you're losing money. You're having money sit there, because telling is the least persuasive way to sell. Just like if we told our significant other, we told our kids to do something, they freaking hate that. Right?
Yeah.
I hate what to do. Right? Not really good for me. Right? So start asking questions for them to realize that there's an issue there is like how they start internalizing the pain. So if I ask them, like, okay, so, you said that you've been thinking about investing for 2 years. You've had this money sitting in your bank account, like, but you haven't started yet. I guess, like, because you haven't started yet, how is that affecting you? They're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, can I offer you another perspective? The money sitting in your account right now, because of inflation, are you aware that it's possibly like losing 9% a year or whatever, right? So I'm giving them perspective,
Right.
And I'm like, with you knowing that, like, how is that affecting you? Like, well, oh my God, I didn't realize. Well, and the fact that you haven't invested for the past 2 years and you could have bought this many properties. And I show them, I'm like, you could have made X amount of dollars in the past couple of years, but instead you haven't, you've actually lost money. With you understanding that, like, how is that, like, making you feel right now, and then realizing a problem that they didn't realize that they had. Right.
Yeah. So I'll drill into that a little bit further because now I know where you're going. So I would say the two biggest problems that I think that when people come and they want to go with online coaching, the biggest thing that I've noticed is one is is Troy going to rip me off? Right. That's number one. Like, is this guy on the internet going to rip me off? And then number two is, am I going to lose all my money by doing this program? Right. Like those are concerns.
Those are concerns, and concerns based off of experiences that they had, which you can address later on in the conversation. I'm talking about their problems, right? So their problems right now are the fact of, like, what they're doing right now and why it's not where they want to be.
Yeah. So that would be more like, a lot of these, the number one result that most people, the problem that they're trying to solve is financially free. They feel like they're in the hamster wheel that you were in.
Exactly.
That's where most people who are coming into the program, that what they identify is, they're like, all right, this guy's doing something that I want. I know real estate is probably the best pathway to get what I want. I want to be financially free, and my job is not getting me there. My life circumstances aren't there. I'm in the rat race. I got these kids. My house is growing. My family's growing. And I don't know. And I know this is the right way, but I don't know if this is, you know what I mean? That's kind of
perfect. So then we would talk to them about, like, so you've been in this job for what, 5 years? Yeah. Like, and at the end of the month, like you said, I think you mentioned earlier that you barely have any extra Uber. And if there's an emergency, this happens. And you mentioned last month that, your kid broke their arm, and then all of a sudden you had a dip in that. It was making you feel, I think, a little bit overwhelmed.
Right.
Like, with you continuously, go to this job and not making this money. Like, how do you feel like this is affecting your family life right now? How do you feel like this is affecting your marriage? How do you feel like this is affecting your kids? You pick one on the outside. They're like, oh my gosh, like, my wife's always stressed out. I'm stressed out. She's always nagging at me. Okay, well, and you experiencing that, like, how is that affecting you? I don't know, like personally, I can't take it anymore. Okay, I can understand why this is so important to you. But what I'm doing is scientifically is I'm releasing cortisol in their body, and their body's going into fight or flight mode on purpose, and it's controlled. And I'm keeping them there, and their brain's gonna want to pop out of it. So like they'll make a joke sometimes about it. Oh, haha. I'm like, okay, I understand that, but seriously, and I'll bring them right back and I make them feel it, right? And so as soon as I do that, then I go into like, well, what have you done in the past to try to solve this? And they'll tell me, well, I've tried to invest in this, or I've taken this course, and then I remove any red flags, any possibilities that I would not close a sale. Like I've done other trainings and they didn't work. I remove all that stuff, and then I get them to envision the future once their problems are solved. So like, suppose we were able to come in and train you to where you could start investing in properties and making more money passively. Like, what would that look like? How many more houses? How much would you want to be receiving passively by the end of the year? Like, or like, what do you see that your life would look like once you have this home in place to where you're making money from it? That might be different than how your life is right now. And I just want them to imagine, again, you using the verbiage that you would use, obviously, for your industry. I'm just making this up off the top of my head. But I just want them to imagine what their life would look like once their problem is solved. And
it's one of my favorite word tracks, just imagine.
Just imagine. Well, see, but you know what they're doing, though? That's the coolest thing. This is why I get all nerdy about this. When they imagine it.
Geek out. Let's go.
When they imagine it, it releases oxytocin in their brain, the love drug, when they see it in their brain. And it creates a future memory that hasn't happened yet, which is the coolest freaking thing. And so
this is like Joe Dispenza stuff, right? Are you familiar with them?
I love Joe Dispenza, for sure. I love Joe.
Yeah.
But that's really what it does. It's the same thing as like when you tell a story on stage, when you speak on stage and you tell a story and the audience's mind, it releases oxytocin in their brain. It's the coolest thing. That's why they stay so intact with you, because they can feel it, they can see it, they can smell it, they can imagine it. And so when I do that in a sales conversation and then I take it away from them, and if I'm like, well, Troy, like, here's my concern. Like, what's going to happen if you don't figure this out? If you keep working this job, you keep not making money at the end of every month, and your wife's still nagging at you, and your kids still feel like they don't see you because you're not present with them because you're constantly working. Like, what happens if this gets even worse? Yep. And then they start releasing cortisol in their body again because they go into fear of future pain. And those are the two reasons why somebody wants to change, is pain or fear of future pain. And so if I include both in a sales conversation, they have internal tension in their body and they are like, I have to do something about it. Not pressure, but internal tension. And when they have all this internal tension in their body, they have to release it. And the only way for them to release it is for them to make a change. And they have to do something different than what they've already done. So it's really cool once you learn how to do this. And if you can do it right and you learn the right tone, you don't trigger them in the conversation, they're going to want to move forward with you.
What sort of things would trigger someone?
Your tone, talking too fast, not listening. Like when I talk about pain, use different tonalities. So I can use a more like empathetic and like concerned tone. Body language, like hand on your heart, you know, like when you're talking about pain, like it shows that you're concerned. Versus like you could be playful, or you could be really curious, or you could be confused, right? There's different types of tones that you can use for different times. And so like, let's say we're talking about pain. And this person told me that their wife is nagging them that, you know, they're not making the money that they want every month. And that their kids are getting frustrated and their kids are always complaining that they never spend time. I'm like, well, like, how do you feel like this is affecting your kids right now? Honestly. Yeah. Versus like, well, how do you feel like it's affecting your kids? Right? They could be like, oh, like what the heck? Like, and they go into defense mode. I'm like, I'm a great dad. What do you care? Yeah, but seriously, right? Because if I use the wrong tone, it's going to show that. And so there's just a lot of self-control that you have to do, like being in sales and just learning. But unless I know what I'm doing, I can't pick up on those little subtleties because my brain can't do two things at once. So if I'm learning what to say, I can't pick up on all those little nuances. It's kind of like when you're driving a car. When you're driving a car and you're listening to a podcast, you're on autopilot driving. right? Because you've done it so many times, you know what to do. But if somebody swerved in front of you and you had to swerve out of the lane and come back, you would have to rewind your podcast another minute to re-listen to it again because your brain can't think about two things at once. So mastering sales is like knowing what to say and what to do. So you're on autopilot, so you can pick up on the little subtleties in someone's voice or their body language or like how they're saying something. You're like, what's behind that? And you can't think about that if you're thinking about what to do.
So do you think that after all of that psychology, and I agree with you, that it boils down to trust as well? Like it boils down to them trusting you and believing that they're getting the value for what they buy?
Well, 1,000%. But you can also convey trust by being knowledgeable in your questions.
Yeah.
Right.
Like being well thought out. That's like, if you look at one of the guys I like who does some podcasts is Lex Friedman. And if you look at his podcast, he's a totally awkward type of a guy, the way he interviews. But yeah, all of his interviews, but he's interviewing like Jeff Bezos, he's interviewing, Tucker Carlson, he's interviewing like every A-list business person in the space. And if you look at his questions, they're very deep and well thought out. Mm-hmm. And that's why people like to come on his podcast, is because he spent all this time doing these things. And I think that's spells to. I want to go through, just because I know we're limited on time, I wanted to go through a few common objections for people who are listening to them and like how that you address them. So first of all, I'm going to just fire them off and then you tell me how you would address it.
Okay.
I need some time to think about it.
Okay, so that's so funny. This the third or fourth podcast in a week that I've gotten this. I was on a lot of them last week. No one get offended when I say this, but I need to think about it. It's not a real objection, right? And so if somebody says I need to think about it, there's something that you did really wrong in the conversation, right? And so just don't shoot the messenger, right? Don't get mad at me. Right. Yeah. Any objection that you get, you caused it. Any objection that was given, you caused it. Right. So it's just taking responsibility for that. But if somebody says, I need to think about it, it's typically because you didn't know how to go deep enough in the call for them to feel enough pain in order for them to feel like they needed to make a change. That's typically where that comes from. And so if somebody says, I need to think about it, the way that you would handle that is by just booking another call. So, and then you would handle it afterwards. So if it's like, okay, yeah, that's not a problem. Troy, I guess what would be like your time frame on wanting to think this over and getting back to me just to make sure that I can be available for you? Right. And then you would tell me like, oh, I need a couple days or whatever. And then I would go into my calendar, which is pretty busy. I'm like, okay, I'm pretty stacked all day that day. I could be available the next morning, or possibly, later that evening for about 20, 30 minutes. Like, would that help you? Yes, you book the call. You send them the calendar invite. They accept the calendar invite. And then you say, well, Troy, before you go, I guess, like, what were you wanting to, like, go over in your mind before we speak on Monday, just to make sure that I can be available for our call? And then typically they'll tell you what's behind that. Typically it's like, oh, the price, or like, I just spent 10 grand yesterday and my husband's going to kick my ass, if I did that, whatever. Right. And they'll typically tell me, but if you get that over and over, like a pattern, I would just be concerned to look at your sales conversations and be like, did I go deep enough? Did they open up? Because sometimes you experience where people don't open up. So it's like, can I learn the skill to help them open up? Like, don't continue the conversation. They're not opening up. Just be like, hey, Troy, like, I guess I'm just trying to understand here. Like, between you and me, you're like, what's the real reason why you're wanting to even look at real estate trading in the first place, just to make sure I can understand, right? And getting them to trust you. Because if you feel that tension, that awkwardness, and you don't address it, it's going to be there at the end anyways. It doesn't just go away,
Like, no, 100%. That's great. I like the way you do that. And I've always agreed with you on that statement. Is like, if they're not reaching for their credit card at the end of the call with me, then I didn't do my job. Yeah. It's trying to get your people on the same page, and I think that you're such good at that. I want to hear it from you personally. So the next one I would say is, I got to talk to my spouse. We obviously, the way we overcome that objection is the beginning is, do you have anybody that needs to be on this call who's going to make a decision for you that you need to make sure they're here? But obviously not everybody's going to bring their spouse and they're going to use that as something, and that goes back to, again, us setting up the call the right way. But with that objection, how do you handle that one?
So I typically handle that in the beginning of the call as well. And the way that I ask that is like, oh, like, forgive me, I didn't ask, like, are you on your own or do you have a family that you take care of? Right. And so if they're like, oh,
that's smooth. What?
I didn't get that for me. My boyfriend gave me that one. Jeremy's on top of that one. He gave me that. He's like, when you say forgive me, they're more inclined to tell you. So I was like, I picked that up from him. That was really good. Forgive me, I forgot to ask you. Are you on your own? You have a family that you take care of. And so like, oh yeah, I'm married, I have kids. So now I have a dynamic, right? And I'm like, okay, they have a family. I understand their way of thinking a little bit better. And then with men and women, I do identity frame. So with women, I typically frame them as independent, like they can make their own decisions. With men, I typically frame them as providers and providing for their family. That's my frame of like where I try to take their brain. If you frame them, they typically are going to behave the way that I frame them to be. Okay. So I always ask, well, like, and your spouse, I get their name. So like, and, Susie, like, does she know that we're on this call right now? Or is this kind of like a secret surprise thing? Like, help me understand, secret or they know. So that's typically where it goes. It's a secret or they know. And I'm like, well, how do you think they would feel about you doing a more intensive, like, mentorship, learning real estate so that you can start having, your money work for you and your family so that you can start setting yourself up, long term, right? I would talk about the result that they would want. And what are they going to say? They either are on board or they're not on board. Or if they don't know, you would say, well, if you were to think about it, how do you think that they would feel? And again, on board or not on board. So if they say that they're on board, you just frame them into having a healthy relationship. So you're like, oh, wow, it's really supportive. Like you'd be really surprised at like how many people I talk to that don't have their spouse's support and they have to figure this out on their own without that support. Like you have a really healthy relationship. So I just frame them to be like, hey, like people do this with or without the support. I just frame that. And then if they say that they don't.
That's smooth too. I like that.
Yeah. So if they say that they don't, they're like, oh, yeah, they wouldn't be supportive. Then I frame them as being a good provider if they're a guy or being independent. So if it's a woman, wow, you'd be really surprised on how many other women also have to figure this out on their own. Like you're really independent and really proud of you for like taking this initiative yourself and figuring this out on your own. If it's a guy, he doesn't have the support. Hey, like you'd be surprised at how many other guys I talk to that figured this out on their own without their wife's support originally because they're trying to be providers so a family take care of them. And eventually the wife goes around and is really proud of the decision that they made. Like, I really honor you. So you just
Yeah, love it. No, it's smooth. It's definitely smooth. I like it a lot. Let me see if I can think of one more. Okay. I don't have enough money.
Well, how do you mean? What do you mean with that?
Well, I just spent money. I just don't feel like it's the right time for me. Okay, it's not the right time, and I don't have enough money for the program.
Okay, so now we're at 2 objections, so we have to address both. Okay.
Yep.
So, every single objection that you get, you just want to ask for clarity. Because if I assume that I know what they mean, then I'm lost. So I just need to know what they mean. So like when you say it's not the right time, like what do you mean by that exactly? Do you mean like you don't have time to spend during the week learning this? Like help me understand what you're talking about.
Right. Copy that.
So help me understand, Troy. Like what do you mean by that exactly?
Yeah, it's just like I'm so busy at work right now. I just don't know when I would be able to make time for the calls. And so I just don't know if I have enough time.
Well, can you help me understand, just so I have some more context, like how much time you think that you would need to actually put in this each week in order for you to get results?
Yeah, I mean, well, I know you said that you need to have at least 6 hours a week to do this. Yeah, so 6 hours a week, I just don't have that time.
So you're going to do either one or two things here. So depending on how they answer. If he's like, oh, well, I need to do like at least like 10 hours, you could say, well, I mean, you could. Typically, most of our clients, what they do is they put in at least like 6 hours a week. So about it like an hour a day, and then they have a day off on Sunday to hang out with their family. Like, do you think you can allocate an hour a day so that you can actually put that financial freedom in place so that you don't have to keep working these over hours and not spending time with your kids? So you frame it like that. But if he answered like that, like 6 hours is too much, then I would reverse it. I would say, okay, I hear where you're coming from. Can I offer you another perspective? Yes. Earlier in this conversation, my concern here, Troy, is like earlier you mentioned to me that you're working 6 days a week right now. On Sundays when you're home, you don't feel like you can do anything because you're so exhausted. Your kids said that they were, feeling like you're not spending time with them and your wife's nagging you all the time. And then at the end of the month, you still are barely making it. And you felt like, I think you said you were a little overwhelmed and that you were really wanting, you were really wanting to like put your family in place and provide for your family in a different way so you can have your money start working for you so you don't have to work so hard. Like, are you sure this is really what you want? Right? As you use the words back on them, they say yes. I'm like, okay, so do you feel like, how are you going to be able to put that financial freedom in place for your family if you don't figure out how to give an hour a day to this? Right? And because what happens in their brain at the end is that their brain is going into fight or flight mode. They can't think. They literally are in panic. So when they say an objection, sometimes the best thing that you can do is just wait a few seconds before you even answer to let their brain kind of register what they just said because they're not thinking. And so if you use their words against them, that's why I learned at NLP. NLP use like their languaging. So if they said their kids earlier, you don't say they're your children, you say your kids. You use the same words that they've used throughout the conversation. So you can write down some word like verbiage that they used and use it at the end. So like, I'm just confused. Like earlier you said you were going through this and that you're wanting this. Like, are you sure this is what you want? And I feel like, well, crap, like I have to do something. I'm like, well, do you realize like, I like this for like high ticket coaching. I'm like, do you realize that the version of you right now is not the same version of you that has these homes, that has the income coming in, that has the ability to, like they have energy, they hang out with their kids on the weekend. Do you understand that? Well, yeah. Do you understand that this version of you needs you right now?
Yeah, I like that. That's smooth too. It's smooth. Good. I love this. Kayla, you're awesome. I want to go into a couple other topics before we wrap things up because this is gold and I could keep asking you questions all day long. I promise you that. So first question is, you mentioned NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. A lot of people probably don't even know what that is. Can you talk about what that is and maybe some good books or some good material that you've found helpful for your studying of that specific theory? Yeah,
I went through the Robin Mundane's Foundation. It's like 100-hour course on like learning how to do that. So I went through that. That was really helpful. The biggest thing with
what is it, Robin
Mundane's Foundations. That's the same one that Tony Robbins like put on, I guess. So I went through that. That was really interesting. They do mostly like strategic breakthrough work, right, on that. So that's where I've learned a lot of this stuff from because I like to be like, I was so like curious, like how does somebody live some way for 10 years and have one conversation and change everything, right? Like that, I was obsessed with. I'm like, how is that possible? Because a sales conversation is a short conversation. So I'm like, if I can learn how to do that in one conversation and they'll change your life forever, like I was like a piece in their life that changed it. So like, that's what I became really obsessed with. And they really talk about languaging with that and listening to someone's language patterns. Like, have you ever heard somebody say like, oh my God, they stabbed me in the back? Like, like where is the stab wound? You know? And if you can say language that really is not helpful for us, like, oh my gosh, like this is freaking awful. I hate everything. Like the world's come crashing down. I'm like, what do you mean the world's coming crashing down on you? Like we use a language that holds us captive. And so when you understand the languaging and you could talk to somebody and like, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm just so burnt out. I can't do it anymore. Like, well, what do you mean? Like it helped them find different languaging. It helps their brain kind of rewire itself. And that's just some more advanced stuff. I'm just really obsessed with it. I don't think it's not necessarily everything that you need in a sales conversation, but it definitely helps on someone's mindset and getting them to think differently.
Yeah, I like I like what you're saying. And I actually took an NLP course like probably 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the stuff. It's something that I think you need to constantly retool and get better at. Kayla, I wanted to bring up something. You mentioned you have a boyfriend, and I'm just going to And for those of you guys who are listening right now, like sales is something that, it's very tough. Now you're dating somebody in the space that is also a high ticket closer. I want to know what those conversations are like at your house, because I know me and my spouse, right? Like we always are talking about real estate. So is it like, how are those conversations? And is it like, I mean, I would say it's a good strategy to date somebody in the same field, because you're going to get better together, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, Jeremy's very interesting because he's been in sales for over 17 years. He's actually turning 47 tomorrow, so he's your age, Trey. And it's just really funny because he's so smart. I've never met somebody that's so obsessed with learning. Like he reads 5 books a month. He's just obsessed with like always like learning. And his company trains, as many industries as we do, even more. Like they have huge clients like ExxonMobil and that kind of stuff. So being in his world is really interesting because I learned so much, like just being around him. But what's really cool is that like we balance each other. So like I give him feedback on like connecting emotionally with like the audience, and like I'll give him different feedback like that. I'm like, hey, when you pulled this person up on stage, if you stay just a couple minutes longer, and like put the microphone back to them and ask them something more personal, I would have created this feeling in the audience. And then with me, he's like, hey, when you talk like this, I want you to slow down a little bit more, and what that does in the brain is this. So it's like we help give each other feedback, but the conversations in the home are really hard because we both read body language and tone very, very well. So we can't keep anything from each other, right?
It's like keep players.
No, it's so bad. It's so bad, Trey. Like if I'm upset about something, like I really try to like pick my battles. I've learned that over time. Like, hey, like it's not worth it. Like, don't bring it up. He has a big keynote coming up. Like, just don't say anything. Right. And I'm like, I'm just going to wait. I'll wait a couple of days and I'll say it afterwards. And it'll be something really silly. Just like, hey, when you're talking about this, it made me feel like this. Like, we don't ever argue, but it's just, we have conversations. Or like, hey, when you brought me to this event, you were really busy with everything, which I completely understand, but you like didn't introduce me to anybody when you walked up because you were so worried about your keynote and being about to get on stage. Like that would be a conversation we would have like a year ago. And he can pick up on it. It's so frustrating because like I'll wait to say anything. He's like, something's wrong. I'm like, no, everything's fine. He was like, no, I can tell your body language. You're holding something back. What are you not telling me? I was like, I'm purposely not telling you until afterwards so that you can focus. He's like, no, you have to tell me. Right. And I'll do the same thing. Like if I'm like, or like if I have a surprise, I wanted to surprise him with something. Like he'll be like, what are you not telling me right now? You seem like there's something off. Like, I'm like, I'm trying to surprise you with something. Just don't ask, And I do the same thing for him. Like yesterday I was on the phone call with him and he got off the phone. He was like, I love you, bye. And like he hung up the phone. I was like, no, that there was something off with his tone. And I called him back and I was like, are you okay? What's wrong? And he was like, oh, well, I'm really stressed out about this and this and this going on, but it has nothing to do with you. And I'm like, well, talk to me. Like, what's going on? And then he was like venting me for like 10 minutes about what was going on. But I picked up on it. Right. Yeah. And so it's just so cool. Like it gets me in trouble, but it's also super cool. Because, like, what if I didn't pick up on that and he went into this dinner stressed out about something that was going on and he wasn't able to focus and be present at this big business dinner that he went to last night because he didn't vent to me, And so it's just really cool because we can support each other in such a high level way and pick up on the little nuances that we didn't realize. And so it's just really, really awesome. And we get to nerd out about sales stuff all the time too, which is really cool. So I really, really love being in a relationship with this guy. Like I definitely waited a couple years to like heal my heart before I was ready for anybody. And I wasn't looking for anybody. It just like happened. And so it was just really cool because I didn't know who he was.
How did it happen?
We met at ClickFunnels almost 2 years ago. Yeah. So
what, the funnel hacking live?
Yes. He met me in the hallway. So his business partner stopped me in the middle of the hallway and asked me if I wanted $200. I was like, what?
That's how you do it these days?
Apparently. He was like, you want $200? I was like, what? He was like, you need to overcome a money objection. I was like, what do you mean? And so they were doing like these sales videos. I was like, yeah, I'll take $200. And so they did a money objection to me and I solved it. And then they gave me the $200 and they're like, hey, do you want to meet Jeremy Miner? And he was like right there. And I just saw this guy in an ad like a couple days before crawling on the stage in this ad. It was like, that's the guy that was crawling on the stage. I was like, oh my God, Jeremy Lee Minor. And he was like, oh, hey. And then he met me. And I didn't even think twice about him. And we like took a picture together and I'm walking away with $200. I'm all excited. And then the next day he kept seeing me in the hall and he's like, hey, I looked you up and And he's like giving me a hard time. And then he started watching my stories and I'm like, this guy likes me. And he found me at a party and like came to this party and talked to me outside for 5 hours until no one was at the party left. And then he just
was closing the deal. That's what he was doing.
He really was. And then we
I'm convinced.
Yeah. I think 6 weeks later, he flew out to Miami and took me on a date. And yeah, so it's just been together ever since. It's been awesome.
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. For those people right now who are listening, they want help with sales and they want to get a hold of you. Number one, how do they follow you? And then how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So my Instagram is Kayla Living Boldly. We also have a podcast as well called Closing Deals and Heels. So my ladies, check out that. That's great. And then
we'll make sure we link to it.
Yeah. And then, I think that the biggest thing for you, if you want to learn how to sell, is just having a willingness to learn. Training is something that you do every day. It's not something that you do once. So like, if you can have somebody evaluate your calls and listen to your tone, or even evaluate them yourself and like just watch yourself. So many times that we just don't be present with ourselves and like learning it better. Just watch your calls, listen to them and be like, like what could have I done better in this situation? I think that's really, really helpful, increasing and learning, growing, definitely follow me, follow Jeremy for some tips, and happy to support any way that we can. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing your story. I can't imagine where you're headed next. Just final thing is, where do you think next is? I mean, you're super young. You're super ambitious. You completely changed your life. That thing happened to you, right? Like that thing actually happened. So where do you see, what's the next thing for you? What is like that goal?
Yeah. So this is the first year that I feel like calm.
Yeah.
So my whole life I've been always in survival mode. And so this year has been like calm. And so I've really taken a step back instead of rushing things and try to build out more stuff. So for me, my thing is to get my company running to where I can just kind of pop in and train and not have to be like in it, can be like on it. So I'm like building out my team right now. I'm really training my girls in my team right now, really helping them, supporting them, getting all that going. And as soon as that is set up, I want to do a lot more keynotes and I want to do more charity work. So my big thing is like helping women and girls that have been through domestic violence and sexual assault. So I want to build a center and help these girls learn how to sell so they don't have to go back into the streets and everything like that. So that's a big project on my heart. And so just trying to get to that point to where I can help them do that. And then that would be so fulfilling for me. And then I can look at the next thing. But until I have the systems built out for that, I can't do it. So that's like what I'm focusing on right now.
Well, that's awesome. That gave me goosebumps when you said that. So that's super cool. I appreciate you sharing your story, you sharing your journey. And Kayla, you're an amazing person. And I wish you nothing but success. So thanks for coming on the podcast.
I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on. And anything that I can do to help your girl or help you guys out, please let me know. I'm happy to support you any way I can.
All right. Thanks a lot, Kayla. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Chris, bye, Troy. Have a good day. Bye.
Did you ever want to invest in real estate? Did you ever want to live the life of your dreams? Did you want financial freedom? We have a free Facebook group, the Millionaire Mentorship Facebook group for real estate investing. Make sure you join. The link is in the description. If you want to schedule a free call with me and my team and you actually want to start, I would suggest you do so. We have helped hundreds of people change their lives, and all they had to do was get started. They booked a call with me and my team, and they got the ball rolling. And I'm so confident that if you don't get your first or next investment property within the first 90 days, you don't pay, and I'll give you $1,000 cash. That's how confident I am. Obviously, you got to take action. You can't just do nothing and expect that to happen, but that's life. Life's all about taking action. Make sure you give this podcast a 5-star review, share it with a friend, and take action.